All right, so this is podcast number 2 of the Amazing Autists podcast. Obviously, the main talking point right now is the election and what's going on, and if there's going to be like a recount or whatever. And obviously, it does look very sketchy. It does. My gut intuition, my gut reaction to it is that it is being rigged. It was rigged. Obviously, that's not like you can't like use your gut feeling in court or anything. But that is my if I had to guess, I would guess that it is being rigged. There's a lot of sketchy shit. Hopefully more and more stuff comes out.
I know that they are doing a recount in some states like Georgia.
They're
So that
officially
is like actually happening, yeah.
nice. They're officially doing a recount. Because I just woke up, so I haven't been paying attention to what just happened, like today or whatever. Was that today?
I've just been like hearing it randomly.
Okay. Yeah, it's very sketchy. Just it extremely sketchy. There's a lot of sketchy things that suggest that it has been rigged, like the 100,000 votes that came in for Biden in one without any other votes for any other candidate, like not just Trump but Libertarian, Green Party, whatever. And then also, if you look at the mail-in, there was a surge of mail-in ballots late in the election, right? But it only happened in the states where they needed it, which is extremely sketchy. Like it only happened in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia. It only happened in the swing states. Like every other state, like it didn't have a problem counting its votes. There wasn't this late ballot surge, which that's fucking sketchy. And then there's like the fact that Biden got less votes than Obama and Hillary in every state except for the ones that they needed extra votes at the end to win. It just seems very sketchy. And he wasn't doing nearly as well on the. I know we can't really trust the polls, but he wasn't doing as well on the polls as like Obama, but somehow got more votes than him. I don't know. It's very sketchy. Everyone knows that the Democrats rigged the primaries against Bernie, but somehow now we're supposed to believe that it's very, very unlikely that this election has been rigged. I personally, my gut intuition is that it was rigged. Obviously, hopefully more comes out that proves it. There's videos of people outright saying that they're like ballot counters or whatever, outright saying they're rigging it, outright confessing to it. Those are obviously somewhat anecdotal, but it's genuine. It looks like it's legitimate ballot counters or whatever who have pretty much confessed on camera on their shitty social media stuff. So,
And yeah, we were just like kind of trying to break down the psychology of democracy and how like in order to actually have a proper democratic system, you need people who are basically going to be honest, right? And
yeah,
and that like it's a really fundamental issue. It's
yeah,
just strange because people treat democracy like it's just this one system, and it's just it'll fit in any kind of society, and it's the perfect system, and you know it's a bit odd that
yeah,
for people to expect the system to be exactly the same just because it's named democracy, right? Like in every society around the world.
yeah. This election is really revealing how kind of fragile it is. Like what it's really coming down to is people supervising and counting ballots, and these people aren't like super professional. They're mostly like ordinary citizens from the looks of it. And as we can see in this election, they play a huge role in having a functioning democracy. And we're just kind of trusting that these people are on board with being honorable and honest. And it's just that's kind of a fragile thing to put your country's future in. Um, yeah, people talk about certain traits like IQ, and there's definitely a correlation between IQ and how well countries do, and how high level of a civilization they have. But there's so many other traits, like you're saying, like honesty. Like there's so many other mental traits that we don't really measure as much, and there's we don't know exactly what it takes for it to have a functioning civilization. We don't fully understand like what the makeup of the population has to be to have a functioning civilization. Like for example, like to have free speech, which is strongly correlated with IQ. Like what percentage of people in the country have to believe in free speech? Obviously, it's some of them, but like what we don't we aren't really sure about that. And like similarly with traits like honesty, like if we're gonna have a functioning country, what percentage of the population has to genuinely believe in honesty and adhere to it? And we kind of don't really we don't understand these things that well. Like we haven't measured these things. We haven't really I don't think we've put too much thought into them. And yet we're just fucking importing huge massive massively different populations, huge amounts of massively different people into our countries and expecting them to all have the same like distribution of these mental traits. It just seems nearsighted. Like,
I mean,
what
when
if
you
there
think
is?
about it, like I just I just think that so many parts of the world, it's almost like taking for granted that there's going to be corruption. So you're if you live in a society where people just expect others to be honest and to be true to like the system that they have in place and to follow the law, that's almost like exceptional in a way. I
Yeah,
mean, like just when you look at the world as a whole, I mean, yeah,
yeah. Most places are corrupt. You kind of wouldn't just expect them to be expect everyone to just be honest and fair. That's not how most people on Earth. I don't know about most people on Earth, but yeah, most countries have some degree of corruption.
like I'm just thinking of like the Soviet Union post collapse, the Chinese with their communist system, a lot of like
Well, like every South American and African
yeah,
country.
exactly, and that's like a huge like percentage of the world, right?
Yep. And I don't know. For my impression is when I talk to or see these leftists explain themselves, when I see their views and their morality, I don't think at all that they would be above rigging an election. Like they are not fair in any other way. So like when you try to have a debate with them, they don't even adhere to the rules of logic. They don't adhere to the real rules of logic. They don't adhere to honesty. Then they're not intellectually honest. Yet somehow we're gonna trust them to be honest when it comes to counting votes. I see when you look at like I mean we can kind of extrapolate these things from them and their morality. You can extrapolate kind of what someone would do in a situation or wouldn't do based on their morality. And I mean they're not honest in other areas. That's why we have these disagreements with them. Like we're genuinely like we said in the last podcast, our morality is basically we're trying to be intellectually honest. That's why we're on the right, and that's why we disagree with leftists so strongly. It's because they're not honest. Like they're not intellectually honest. They're not honest in debates. They're slimy people. I don't think at all. I don't think they have the morality in place at all to play fair in when it comes to counting votes. They don't seem like it's just like yeah. I guess what I'm saying is largely like it's like I guess it's not super substantial because it's largely like a gut feeling. But I mean, gut feelings are kind of you when we do look into things thoroughly, it kind of does start with the gut feeling. Like you kind of look for evidence to support a gut feeling you have, and I have a strong gut feeling that it's rigged and that these people I don't think these people would play fair or count the votes properly at all. It's my impression.
Kind
And
of like
like
that situation where they have that experiment and um they tell people not to do something, and like if there's a camera watching, they're less likely to do it. But if there isn't, like they figure that they can just get away with it and that there won't be any consequences. It's just how much of that could be at play when it comes to voter fraud. It's like if people could get away with it hypothetically, it's like, yeah, how many of them would engage in such acts and just, not feel bad about it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, for sure. What determines how people act is largely the social norms and what people understand the morality of the society they're in to be. Like some people who are being on who behave with like so-called honor do so because it's a social norm. Like not everyone who behaves with honor does so because it's like their own ingrained belief system. A lot of people have like have been doing it like with just following laws in general. Like a lot of people adhere to laws and social norms not because it's their own values, but because it's the norm of the society and it's enforced to some extent. So yeah, if when the society changes fundamentally, it seems like it would be an exponential thing where it would genuinely get worse and worse. I think that's what we're seeing. Like when you say with like when you talk about how people act when they know they're being watched. I mean, how people act when they know that no one's going to particularly care if they are dishonest about counting votes, or whatever. Of course, they're going to do it more. Like it's
Exactly. And
yeah,
isn't it that's really like a testament of true character, isn't it? Like when you act the same way regardless of
yeah.
like if you know you get caught versus if you know you wouldn't. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
It's just
it shows your true morality. Yeah, and yeah, I think it's naive to think that people genuinely do truly have high level moralities, and we know they don't because we actually talk about morality all often. We get into discussions about morality, and we can see that people don't actually have very sophisticated morality. But I think in general, regular citizens assume that uh, the rest of the population is more moral than it is.
that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because like you were talking about IQ earlier, and it's just like there is that Dunning Kruger relation where it's like the smarter you are, you the more like you're aware of what you don't know. So it's like I wonder if there's a similar phenomenon going on with morality,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure.
like the more moral you are, the more like aware you are of how like fragile
Immoral
morality
people
is.
can be, yeah.
Yeah, and how there's not. Yeah, just of how immoral everyone is. Like when an intelligent person or like has doubts about themselves. I mean, it's just doubts about the nature of knowledge in general. So you can also say they have doubts about just knowledge in general. You could extend it to other people too. I mean, they didn't study that, but I'm sure you could find that also because it's not like with the Dunning-Kruger effect. I would imagine it's not just that intelligent people only doubt themselves. It's not like they doubt themselves and then think everyone else is super smart or super
Hmm.
competent. I would assume they doubt just the nature of knowledge and the nature of competence in general. And yeah, fully that applies to morality. Yeah, I know. I would definitely say that most people seem to be overly confident that the rest of society is moral, and it's kind of disturbing.
But I feel like even more so maybe with morality, because it's like with intelligence, could you say that you could just be born highly intelligent? But with morality, like morality always takes like definitive action, right? Like in reality, like like how many people are actually just born, being super honest, being super like altruistic, being extremely kind all the time. Like I'm sure that happens, but actually, I don't know what kind of point I'm making here.
Yeah.
Just that it
No,
seems
I
like
would.
when it comes to morality, it really is more what you do, right? Rather than what you're born with.
Yeah, it's like, and it does seem like there's a lot more trial and error. Like I feel like most people who are honest, like yeah, people don't necessarily start out just thinking they should be honest. You kind of learn through some experience with dishonesty. whether it's you being dishonest and then regretting it, or you experiencing people dishonest being dishonest to you. That is a lot of the time where the morality comes from. I would say it's a lot of trial and error. Where I mean, there may be differences that people are born with certain capacity for morality. I don't know, like we were talking about in the last one, like certain words, like and concepts, like we talk about these things, and we might be taking for granted that everyone
But
can fathom these concepts, like even these concepts, like being honest.
yeah, because I'm talking about like morality, like it's understood what I'm talking about,
Well,
but
yeah,
it's really
most people do, um, but again, like we use words that are common in society, but and pretty much everyone uses them. Like we were talking about, like with the word racism, pretty much everyone uses that, but when different people use it, they mean different things. And like we were talking about in the last podcast, like a lot of the time when black people use the word racism, they're not actually talking about a universal concept in which you should never view one race as superior to another or treat one race as superior to another. Like they're not thinking about it in the same way. So while they use the same words, they're not fathoming the same meaning. And that may also be going on with other concepts that we kind of take for granted as commonly understood, like honesty. Like we were talking about, like most people use obviously everyone knows the word honesty. Everyone kind of um not I wouldn't say everyone sees it as a virtue in the same extent, but people tend to use that word and have an idea of what it means. But even people's idea of what that means, I'd say, are probably different. Like we were talking about earlier, we've argued with these leftists for years. We've seen what they say and how they debate, and they're not intellectually honest, and that's also a form of honesty. It's not just saying it's not like right. There's different
right.
levels to being honest, right?
Because I was just gonna bring that up actually, because for some people being honest means not lying, but for some
Yeah,
people being honest means always telling the truth. And I feel like there is a distinction there.
yeah, like because you can lie to yourself, and if you're saying, well, I believe this, it's like even that might not be honest, even if like because sometimes people can genuinely lie to themselves. It gets a little more complicated, the concept of honesty in that situation, but
Especially if they're a compulsive liar, right?
yeah. And then yeah, I mean, compulsive liar, I guess that's another type of person. I don't know. I haven't really thought about the phenomenon of compulsive liars, but I would imagine I don't know, they'd be also lie to themselves. Yeah, there's just different people value different things. Like a lot of people value emotions, and they think that their subjective like their feelings are valid, and they for them being honest is just like, well, I genuinely feel this way, but it's like you're not. It's so people like have like a lot of people value quote unquote subjective truth. I personally don't believe in the concept of subjective truth. I think there's truth and or something's either true or it isn't. But yeah, a lot of people value their emotions, their emotional experiences, and so for them, they are being honest when they're just honestly expressing their emotions. But yeah, those emotions may not be the result of honestly processing other things. So
It's a
it's
really complicated thing, right?
yeah,
Because you could literally say the words "I don't know" to something, and that could be a form of honesty, right? Because you're telling the truth that you genuinely don't know.
yeah,
Um, so it's like being honest doesn't always imply that you're fully cognizant of all the different characteristics of a particular situation, which is why I think I gravitate towards honesty being just not lying instead of always telling the truth. Because, like, yeah, I don't know.
yeah. But
Like
at
when you
this,
just openly don't lie to someone, like you openly don't say things that you know to be false.
yeah,
Because we can't always know that we're telling the truth, even when we think we do know. Like the most honest thing sometimes is to tell somebody that I don't know the truth. So
yeah. In a way, but I'd say yeah, that is also a form of knowledge to know that you don't know. So that is a form of truth in a way. But
That's
yeah,
true.
I get what you're saying. No, I mean the way people just the way most people are, they're not honest. Most people fundamentally aren't honest.
And sorry, I was just gonna make one more. I was just gonna bring up one more anecdote where it's like you could be in a situation where you don't like somebody, and that's the truth, right? But it's like you like if you're being honest under a system where you simply do not lie, it doesn't mean that you openly have to tell that person that you don't like them, right? You could still be honest, but not say the truth out loud like that, right?
Um, if you don't like someone, I guess. But there, I don't know. When it comes to lying, there's like the idea that if you know that someone has a false understanding of something and you're not correcting them, you could consider and you I don't know. You can kind of consider that lying in a way, but it's complicated because you're not. Yeah, you technically wouldn't be lying. Like if you know someone has a certain understanding of something and you're actively like allowing them to continue that, then it is a little bit of dishonesty.
Like, would you say it's a spectrum to the point where, like, if something's important enough, you do have to tell the truth? Like, if you don't like somebody, let's say, and like they are saying things that you don't agree with, like, is it more moral to just distance yourself from them, or do you think you have to actively tell them that I think I have to be truthful about things? Like, I
Well,
don't know.
I mean, it's like obviously no one has to do anything, but I think overall it's probably I think overall speaking truth like is beneficial in society because I think a lot of good comes from adhering to truth. So if if someone is lacking in truth in some way that if you think someone's lacking in truth in some way, I mean people have blind spots. So I mean I think it would probably be better to say the truth. But then again, yeah, I don't know. In general, I think it's good to speak the truth, but obviously, yeah, you don't have to say it in every situation. Like if someone's if you're at a bar and someone's fucking like being annoying, you don't have to be like, listen, you're an annoying. I think you're an annoying person. I mean, a lot of the time that's going to cause conflict that you might not want to partake in. So I don't know. It's fucking complicated.
Exactly, because it's like I don't know. It is complicated for sure, and that's why I don't know. Yeah, that's why morality is such a complex topic. Because it's like you could literally spend your whole life um, trying to like have dialogues with people who are not telling the truth, right? But it's like, would you be better off just spreading the truth, or and just hoping that your message gets out there? Do you have to target people not telling the truth, or do you have? I don't know.
I would say it's probably just in general, speaking the truth is beneficial. I'd say yeah, because like even like a lot of time, yeah, there are consequences for telling the truth where that you know, it could there could be some like hostile reaction, like we're seeing now. If we in society, if we tell the truth about racial differences, we will be attacked. Likely, I mean, we might not, but there is a pretty high likelihood of us being attacked. And I would say that it's better to be aware of that than to not be aware of it. And I'd say if people were speaking about these things more, it's easier to be more aware of a problem that's developing instead of whereas if everyone avoids it, it can get to the point where it's more dangerous. It's like and people aren't aware of the threat of speaking the truth about a certain issue if people aren't already doing it. Like if society forms this ideology, like just like what if like we just let the left just talk and we really didn't say anything. Like no one on the right said anything. It kind of is how it is to too far of an extent. I would say I say it already is like this to too great of an extent, but
Which is why the polling was inaccurate, like both elections,
exactly, yeah.
because people were afraid to like actually,
Well, we just don't
you know,
engage. Also, we don't like engaging with these people. We know who they are. We know their character, and we don't owe them. any engagement. But then that's me kind of contradicting myself. But yeah, like just hypothetically, what if we let the left just just say their narrative unopposed all the time? It's pretty clear that there'd be some pretty radical norms that would be become very popular. Like if we let them just keep putting forth the narrative that there are all these genders and that to misgender someone is a form of violence. If no one spoke up against about if no one spoke up against that at all for years and years and years, and that became a strong social norm, and then one day someone did, there's probably a higher risk of violence for that person. Possibly, maybe not, because I don't know, but there could be a higher risk of violence for that person than if people were challenging it the whole time. I would say, yeah, if people were challenging it, like if people were saying what they really thought the whole time to these people who were talking about like genders, for example, and all these different genders, if everyone who didn't believe in that bullshit was just saying it outright the whole time, I think the current situation with regards to that subject would be a lot better. Whereas I think people tend kind of shut up a little bit because they don't want a lot of people don't want to be seen as offensive, and then that kind of fosters the environment where it then becomes socially abnormal to speak out, and then it becomes seen as like some kind of evil, and you can get like genuine hostility for it. In general, I think speaking truth is beneficial. It's like because like we were saying, I mean, we know the correlation between IQ and having a higher IQ and having a functioning society. And like, why is IQ good? I mean, I would say it's like IQ is a measure of adhering to truth, right? And there's kind of like a window where it's like some different people have different like potential for IQ. Different people have different IQs, but I'd say there's certain levels of information that people can like intake. Like there's maybe a high IQ person, maybe there's a certain range of high IQ people who are the only ones capable of like articulating a certain concept, but it does but people with lower IQs might still be able to grasp it once it's explained to them, right?
Hmm.
Like we know so much shit that really smart people figured out, like about like space and the Earth being round and just general scientific information. There's so much general scientific information that regular people can fathom, but like it took a really smart person to figure it out, and like a lot of this
Yeah,
shit we probably couldn't figure out ourselves, or
it's
we
like
might.
imagine going back like 70 years and just telling like a scientist working on a breakthrough in computers that one day just an average person will be able to utilize this and understand how to maneuver and navigate it. It's like, yeah, it would be kind of mind blowing to think that, right?
Yeah, well, what I was saying is basically like just just like regular people, even like it more average IQ people can still fathom concepts that higher IQ people came up with and adhered to. Like you can still explain things to them. They can still grasp certain concepts. So I would say, and that would make society better, right? If the morality of high IQ people, even if some people like because we know there's a correlation between having high IQ and believing in free speech, for example, and just having a better society. We know that there's that correlation, and why that would be is because of, I would say, ultimately, like deep down, it would be because of adhering to truth. Adhering to truth is good. That's what IQ is basically a measure of. And so, if you increase truth adherence, if you increase the amount of truth that is adhered to in your society, you probably have a better society. And so, I think, yeah, it ultimately is the best thing to do to speak truth.
What
And
happens if you have figures like Einstein who are like obviously really intelligent and really respected and like they come forth with these crazy ideas like the theory of relativity, and it's like you just really don't understand where it's coming from, but you kind of just you just blindly follow it because you just assume that they know what they're talking about. Do you feel like when you are that type of figure there is an extra need to be honest and to not try to cheat people in some way or try to be dishonest because you're trying to gain something in the moment?
um wait, if you're someone like Einstein, I don't know. I've
Like
I see
because
that's the thing.
eventually I guess another smart person will come along and they'll be able to replicate like what you're doing and try to figure out if it's true or not, right? And
Yeah,
then your reputation will be ruined if you know enough people find out that you weren't being honest, right? Like I know that that is an issue actually in science where you know like a lot of people are actually trying to fudge data. Like that's a common thing.
yeah. I mean, my position on Einstein is I don't really understand high level physics or anything. I don't really understand. I never
Yeah,
really looked.
that's kind of the crux of my problem. Like if you don't understand the math, but it's like this
Yeah,
really smart person tells you, trust me, like I understand I understand what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, I feel like there's an extra imperative there, to be honest, if you are that type of figure.
for the
And like I feel like with politicians, it's true as well. I feel like if you're running for public office, you have an extra imperative to be moral and not to be like seen as worse than an average person because people see you as a corrupt, you know, scumbag who's just lying to get to get whatever they want. It's weird,
yeah.
right?
I mean, yeah. I don't know much about Einstein. I've actually heard things about how he was a bit of a fraud, but I don't know what to believe. Again, my position on it is agnostic. Like I don't know. I don't think people should trust just people with authority, based on reputation. But
So when
again,
it
people.
comes to something like, let's say, the theory of relativity, would you just kind of go like, well, I don't really understand it, so I'm just going to be agnostic about it? Like, do you think that's the best approach?
Yeah,
True.
I don't understand the theory of relativity. I never this theory of relativity. I never really looked into it, so my position is like I don't really understand it. It might be valid, it might not be. I'd have to look into it more and think about it more and see if I can understand it.
But you know, I guess the issue would be that there's enough things out there in the world where, like, you kind of have to trust experts, like, regarding certain things. So like, it's hard to know when to apply that or not, I guess, right? It's like, how do I know how many moons there are around Saturn? Like, unless, like, I've literally got a telescope and stuff.
Well, I
So
mean, you
it's like,
don't. I mean, we can say it's pretty probable that with everyone who has telescopes these days, that where they're not lying about the moons around Saturn. But like again, you don't have to outright believe it. Like I don't have the outright belief that there are a certain amount of moons around Saturn. If I would read what the official narrative is and say, yeah, that's probably true. Like, but you don't have to have outright belief, I would say. It's like, yeah, that's probably true. And if you don't know something, it doesn't have to like be crippling. I I think yeah, if you can not know some things, but assign the certain probability that they might be true, might not be true, but it doesn't. I don't think it has to be a crippling thing where you don't have to like form the belief either way.
but do you think when it comes to something like the election, which is really like, it's really it's an extremely important issue, that do you think it would be irresponsible to take an agnostic view and just be like, I'm not sure if like if there's fraud involved or if like how much
Well,
the levels.
again, my view is agnostic. I'm not sure if there's fraud involved, but that's why I was saying I have a gut intuition that it was. But because it's important, I think the appropriate thing is to act on that intuition and look more into it and see if we can find actual fraud because it is such an important thing. But I don't know. I think
Could
yeah,
you
there's not
weigh those two things on a scale basically and say, well, if there isn't, that's not as important as knowing that there might be?
what? What do you
Like,
mean?
just like if you took an agnostic approach and you basically weighed both options, it's like it would be more important to find out that there could be potential fraud, right? Versus there not being, because if there is fraud, then that kind of like taints every election
It's a
going
very
forward,
yeah
right?
yeah.
So
It's a very
it's like,
important thing. So it's worth looking into. Yeah, even if it's possible there was no fraud. Yeah, and but it's also possible that there was, and because that possibility has such strong implications, then yeah,
what about the
makes it worth.
possibility that that there has always been voter fraud, and it's just like, and it's now a percentage of the population which has like a direct interest in making sure that things are actually not as corrupt, and that's why things are coming more to light. Is that a
Yeah.
possibility too?
Yeah, that might also be the case.
Like it seems like people are really involved in politics nowadays, but I could just I don't know if that's just my perception of things, but it's possible, right?
No, I think that is the case. Yeah, people are
Like
becoming more and
when
more
Bush
involved.
won versus Gore, it's just like I don't know what the political climate was. I feel like it wasn't as intense for whatever reason, or
Well, there was a lot.
polarized.
Yeah, there was a lot less networking. I would say the internet would be largely responsible for that.
That's true.
Like if we didn't have the internet, how much of this uh stuff suggesting that there was fraud would we have seen? Like not that much. The internet is huge, and yeah, people are definitely more politically involved. Like people are super politically involved these days. It's dominating society, and we're very divided. But I would say it could end up being a good thing if yeah, because there could have been voter fraud for a long time, and it might just be that now we're seeing it more clearly, and we're actually gonna stop it. Either way, if it has been going on or hasn't, we should still make sure it doesn't.
But you would make the claim that based on what you know about people on the left and right, that you just like you have a strong intuition that people on the left are more likely to be the ones who commit voter fraud, right? You're saying, like based on their psychological profiles and everything.
Yeah, they don't respect American values. They don't respect the history of the country. They think it's fundamentally immoral. So, and yeah, and they're intellectually dishonest as fuck. I would say, yeah, they do seem more likely to be the type to rig an election. I mean, I
Isn't the right really known for kind of like abiding by rules, and the left like is well, actually, I don't know about today, but I don't know. A lot of like branches of the left have portrayed themselves as like just being anti-authoritarian, right?
yeah.
Just sort of, yeah, I don't know. But then again, it's like
Well,
I don't
yeah. I
know.
mean, being a conservative means like you want to that means you to some extent agree with the systems that are in place and you want to adhere to them.
Hmm.
So of course, those types of people would be more likely to adhere to the system consistently and properly. Whereas the left is a fucking shit mess right now. I mean, these people are nuts. Like a lot of the left are fucking nuts. I mean, maybe we see more of these like the crazy like furries and fucking like transgender, all sorts of transgender weird people. Like maybe we see more, maybe we see a disproportionate amount of them on social media or whatever, or wherever we see shit because they're so um obviously ridiculous, but it does seem like there are genuinely a lot of them. Like a lot of the left is deeply stupid. I would say pretty much, I would say the entire left. I mean, no, that's probably I guess that's an exaggeration. You can't say the entire left. But yeah, I mean, there's tiers to how ridiculous they are. Obviously, most people probably recognize that a lot of like the super SJW people are hysterical. But I would say then there's like the tier maybe above that who can recognize that those people are hysterical and don't act as hysterical. But I would say ultimately the norm of the left is still hysteria, because I would consider just adhering to terms like homophobia, sexism, racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia. I would say just adhering to those terms and treating those words as if they're like magical um arguments, like they're magical words that if you can prove someone is that word, then that means they're wrong. Like that's illogical to the point that I would say people who think in those terms, who as if those terms are legitimate, are are also hysterical, and I would say that is almost all people on the left. Like it's still hysteria, I would say.
How do you view the ones that are still pro free speech though?
Um, I mean, obviously, people are multifaceted. I mean, that yeah, of course, I agree more with someone who's it's. I would say that's a moral position. So it's possible that there can be someone who has uh, a lot of traits that I would consider immoral and wrong, but then they have some that I would consider more like genuinely moral, and that's what that would be. Like, yeah, of course, someone believing in free speech is better than someone who doesn't. But I don't know. I don't know what percentage of the left agrees with free speech. It's hard to know. I've encountered people who say they believe in free speech, and then I bring up the concept of hate speech, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well hate speech isn't free speech. Hate speech should be illegal." So again, when it comes to these words and using these terms and these concepts, um, not everyone means the same thing when they say these things. Some people say free speech and they mean something different than what we would mean. But yeah, obviously, free speech is a good thing, I would say.
How about like people who claim that that Trump might be engaging in like anti-free speech activities or policies?
What do you mean?
Like they consider like protesting a form of like, like a constitutional right. And they feel like Trump with his like willingness to use the National Guard to like try to squash them, like they consider that an infringement of freedom. Like do you, like a lot of these protests
Right, right, but
have been like have been involved in like destruction of public property and private property. So I
well,
guess that's a problem, right?
that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, yeah, people do have the right to protest. People should have the right to protest. But I mean, at some point when within your protest there's a shitload of people being violent and people are saying like, listen, you got to stop the violence and the rioting. Like when a certain section of your protest is clearly a riot and you are still partaking in the same group, you're somewhat complicit in the rioting, right? Like if you're preventing it from being dealt with, and you're kind of trying to mask it, right? Like if I'm with a group of 40 people, and we're all like, we're just if we're just like in a group of 40 friends, um, just hypothetically, and we're walking down the street or whatever, and we're all friends, we're just peacefully walking down the street. Of course, cops don't have any right to fuck with us. We're just a group of 40 people. But then, if some of us start as we're walking down the street, start like throwing shit through people's windows and breaking windows, and and then the cops are like, hey, listen, like your group is someone in your group, like part of your group of 40 people here is causing destruction, and then we just don't change anything. We just continue to walk. They don't know exactly who's doing it, but we just continue to walk and allow the destruction to continue. We're somewhat complicit in it happening. We it's partially the responsibility of the group. I
Okay,
mean,
I
there,
see what you're saying.
yeah, like the protests. Yeah, some of them may have been started out somewhat peaceful, and then yeah, I mean, but then they became largely riots where people were burning shit, breaking into buildings, and then at that point, the huge groups of people on the street who you can argue were peacefully protesting were still like impeding with the ability to deal with those crimes, right? Like if there's a murder going on, like in the middle of the street, and then there's a group of people surrounding the crime scene so that cops can't get to it. While like the murder, like let's say it's a really drawn out murder, and they're just like, I don't know, maybe murder is not the best example. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but yeah, let's say someone is slowly beating someone to death in the middle of the street, and then there's a group of people around who know what's going on, and there's police trying to get to it to break it up. And these protesters know that there's a group of but they're blocking these people from stopping it and preventing it. They're somewhat complicit in it happening, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I don't think
I,
he was
they're
Trump is.
complicit in like in the sense that they're not trying to break up the attack, and they're not trying to let the police through, right?
Yeah, well, I would say more. Yeah, more so. They're not. I mean, I guess it's not completely their responsibility to break it up, but when they're actively preventing it from being stopped by people, like they're somewhat complicit in it. And that's the situation with the riots. It's like, oh well, they can say like, oh well, I wasn't doing anything. Well, I mean, if you're in a fucking um, if you're in, well, I mean, it's ironic because like, look at what happened with George Floyd, right? How many of these leftists are saying that that only George Floyd should have been arrested for. Sorry, that only Chauvin should have been arrested. The guy who was on his neck. How many leftists are saying that, right? The other cops didn't kill the guy, right?
Yeah.
But the same leftists who are claiming to be peaceful protesters and not a part of the riots are they're none almost none of them are saying that only the one officer should be arrested. They're pretty much all unanimously calling for all those officers to be arrested, even though only one of them was doing the actual violence. That which is ironic because that by their own logic that would mean that all the protesters are complicit in the riots, right? Because they're
Have they been calling for the arrest of all those officers? I guess they have been, right?
yeah, almost unanimously from what I've seen. I haven't talked to anyone who's like a Black Lives Matter person who's um I haven't seen any one of those people call for only the arrest of Derek Chauvin. I've seen they all want all from what I've seen, all of the people I've seen talk about that who are Black Lives Matter people, they all want all of the officers to be arrested.
So there's definitely there appears to be a disconnect when it comes to evaluating things that they perceive as injustice versus when the opposition perceives what they do as injustice, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And like
there's a
and
moral hypocrisy.
assigning like group guilt kind of towards an act, right?
Yeah, there's a moral hypocrisy clearly because by their those officers they didn't themselves infringe on George Floyd's liberty. But they still see them as complicit. But yet they want to be part of these protests where people are getting killed and things are being violently destroyed. There's violence going on. They want to be, but they don't want to be connected with it. It is definitely hypocritical. It's a moral inconsistency.
But do you think if an injustice occurred, then like your response shouldn't be more like your response shouldn't be to go out and start looting, right? Like what? Like
Yeah, I
it's
know.
like
I mean,
somebody gets mugged, and your response to that is like, let's go attack people
yeah,
ourselves.
let's just go attack someone's business, someone's property, some unrelated person's property. It's like there's no excuse for that. That just makes you a shitty
Yeah,
criminal who attacks
it's
someone's
like
property.
imagine you own like a business in Seattle, and because of events that occurred in Milwaukee, like your business is now being destroyed. It's like your source of like money and a living. Like
Yeah, no, I
it's
mean,
ridiculous. Like you had nothing to do with that.
it's just we're on the verge of mob rule, I would say. This is mob rule. And then yeah, like these people are awful. They're not moral, and we could clearly see there's a shitload of them. And then I don't know, we assume that none of them are part of the election process. None of them. Like they're obviously engaged with politics to some extent, right? All these protesters, right? They take politics quite seriously. And then and they're clearly hysterical and immoral in other areas, and then we're just assuming that these aren't the same people counting the ballots, right? In cities where these things happened, it's none of the people fucking rioting are the same people who are counting ballots or
Yeah,
involved in the process. Like, oh no, they're completely different people. I mean, of course there's going to be some overlap. Like it's almost guaranteed that there is overlap. Like that's I would say pretty much fact, right? That there are people in the vote counting process who were also in the quote unquote protests. That's pretty much an inevitable reality, I would say.
I mean, what's the likelihood really of asking these people if you could like cheat your way to secure whichever candidate you wanted to win versus like not doing that,
Yeah.
like what's the likelihood that any of these people protesting would actually choose to do the like more honest thing?
I mean, they clearly believe that the current system is so immoral that it justifies completely like not partaking in its rules. They obviously believe that. They believe in destroying property. They believe that the system of the country they're in is so immoral to begin with that it does that you're justified in breaking other rules in it. I mean, Yeah, I think well, you can just see by the reaction of leftists. Like, are any of them really concerned about election rigging? Like, they don't care.
Yeah, has one leftist come out and said like I'm concerned about it?
I haven't seen it, which is
Or are all of them just like all these Trump people are just really hysterical, overreacting? This is all nonsense.
that's yeah. I mean, I haven't seen that yet, and I've been searching the internet quite a bit for this stuff. I haven't seen one leftist who was actually concerned about voter fraud, like who
They're
was like,
definitely. It's just a situation where clearly, like the left believes that the right is actually being hysterical here, right?
yeah. Well, that's what but they've believed that the whole time. That is what they believe. They form their fucking groupthink delusions. Where I actually read a fucking article today. Maybe I shouldn't go on this tangent, but I don't know. I don't know. I just randomly read an article because it showed me some article came out about that really annoying American female soccer player who apparently like deserves to have articles written about her. But that's what she said. Like, she's like, well, I took a knee to try to help with injustice in the country, and every response I've seen is just hysterical, incoherent rambling by patriots. Like, she actually used the word patriot in a negative way, as if it was a bad thing. And yeah, that is how they
Oh,
see things.
she's mocking it.
She fully said, okay, like the quote was like, I can actually load it up right now. I mean, I might as well. So it's that dumb, shitty American female soccer player. I mean, I don't know why we should be. No one cares about female soccer in the first place, especially in the US. So I don't even know why I'm seeing articles about this person, but I just check like the soccer news somewhat, and now they're forcing this women shit on us. It's like, so I'll read the
That's
quote.
not even being sexist, right? It's just the truth.
I mean,
It's like if you
it
asked
is
a
a little bit
random person
sexist.
who like which woman's team won the last World Cup, it's like how many people would know that?
Probably very few, especially in the U.S. And yeah, I mean, I would say it is sexist in a way. I mean, it depends what the definition is. I mean, women are inferior at sports to men. That is, I guess, sexist. I mean, what does the sexist actually mean? Do you have to think they're overall inferior or just inferior in some way? I mean,
No, I just meant that there's an agenda, trying to put women down. When it's just when it comes to watching sports, it's
yeah, it's merit
like
based.
they're
It's merit based.
like what? It's like it's just based purely on voluntary
Yeah,
actions.
yeah. So here's the quote. Here's the quote. And this is on her taking a knee. She's like, and she said, I'm proud of it, to be honest. I'm proud of speaking my mind and doing the right thing. I feel this is how change is made by, this is me talking now, by getting on your fucking knee at the beginning of a soccer game. That's apparently how change is made in society. This is the level of delusion we're dealing with. Okay, so then she goes on to say, anytime I have someone try to explain or argue with me about kneeling or arguing, it's just an incoherent, fumbling, patriotic mess, right? That's what she said. Like, she said like, I didn't even misread that. What she said was actually somewhat incoherent. She said, anytime I have someone try to explain or argue with me about kneeling or arguing. So, yeah, anytime I have someone try to explain or argue with me about kneeling or arguing. So people are arguing with her about arguing, apparently. She says, it's just an incoherent, fumbling, patriotic mess. Like, Like, these people outright use the word patriotic in a negative way as if it's wrong to be fucking patriotic. I mean,
Okay, I see what you're saying.
yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. Like they're
Like the very concept of being patriotic is seen as like derogatory almost, right?
yeah, I mean it has been for years. I remember the Stephen Colbert's show, the Colbert Report.
Yeah.
It was just pure mockery of patriotism. That's been the conditioning for a long time where patriots are seen as dumb. I mean, like if this was during Cold War times, you'd just be like, "Oh, that's clearly Soviet propaganda from a foreign power who wants to destabilize us and weaken our country." It's ridiculous. The fact that people are outright talking like this, like mocking patriotism, like they're clearly enemies of the fucking country. They're clearly traitors. That's another, like, I mean, that, I think that word needs to be uh thought about more. People need to, consider what this, is it possible to be a traitor? I mean, I feel like that's a valid question these days. Does anyone think it's even possible to be a traitor to the United States? Do leftists think it's possible to be a traitor to the United States? Because if so, what would constitute being a traitor? Or especially European countries. It's more clear with European countries like um who are giving their countries away to foreigners directly. At least Americans can have more of a convoluted shit explanation for how their country's a melting pot. Even though I don't agree with that anyway. But yeah, this person's name is Megan Rapinoe. In case anyone fucking listening wants to look her up or look up what she said. And
Do you
she
think that the sorry,
so I was just gonna say, and she looks outright like a dyke. I'm pretty sure she's a dyke. But anyway, what were you gonna
I'm just wondering if being called a
say?
traitor was like one of the worst insults. Do you think it was kind of like being called like like a pussy basically? Like when someone's called a pussy, like they try extra hard to come back and be viewed in a different way, right?
Yeah, it was a
Like
first. I
most
mean,
people wouldn't be comfortable being called that, right? So I just wonder if like traitor would
if
have
I'm
been
sure,
like, I
yeah,
don't know.
if you call most leftists that, they would laugh at the idea that like being a traitor is a bad thing. They're outright traitors. Or like, I mean, just if you bring it up on a racial level, if you call a white person a traitor, it's like, well, why? I have nothing to betray in the first place. It's like that's how they think. I mean, like, yeah, if you call someone a race traitor, people will be like, oh, I'm not a race traitor. I just identify with the human race.
Do you agree with those like pejoratives? Like, do you think that they have a place?
Which race traitor?
Or just like almost any insult, really? Like, because I'm thinking about it from a visceral perspective. It's like, is that visceral reaction, like, is it a proper reaction? Do you think?
To
Is
call
it is
someone a
it
traitor?
yeah, or just really any term almost,
I
knowing
would
that it
say
would
yeah.
incite something in that person?
Yeah, I'd say it's a valid word that incites things because it has moral connotations. You're saying someone is deeply immoral in a certain way. I think yeah, for sure it's a valid term. Calling somebody a traitor, it means there's someone who's disloyal, who's betrayed a certain group, which is very, I mean, yeah, it's a perfectly valid moral condemnation to call people that in many cases. Perfectly valid moral condemnation of leftists to call them traitors. They I mean, and I think it's important because people don't even think along those lines these days. Like the idea of nationalism has become such a fringe thing that it's become such an uncommon way of seeing things. And I would say that's by design, that people don't even really entertain the idea of being
But is it
a
uncommon
traitor.
worldwide, or do you think it's specifically the West?
Oh, specifically the West, 100%. Most countries are still normal. If you called someone a traitor, they know exactly what you mean. They're against betraying their country, their people. The West is the only place where, I mean, I can't say the only place, but where people don't have any fucking ethnic self-interest. But it's not even the West. It's white people in the West. Like everyone else has a natural ethnic self-interest. It's just white people have been conned into believing that we don't have our own ethnic group, our own fucking race, our own people.
I feel like the left definitely misconstrues that. Makes you look like you're just somebody who blindly follows authority, when in reality it's way more complicated than that. It isn't a
It's
situation
actually the
where it's like
opposite.
if you aren't putting your group interests ahead, then some other group can easily take you over. Like, that's what literally has happened throughout history. It's just like, why would we believe that if this group stops associating, then this group would naturally also stop associate. It's like you'd need everyone to play on the same like
Exactly.
playing field. But
Exactly.
I
So
guess I guess like to be honest with you, I think a lot of Marxists do want that though. They are being intellectually honest in that sense, where they wish that
where
all
they
countries would just dissolve their borders,
right,
right?
right, but still they're not being honest when they only condemn white people for it. And they don't say, "Oh, black people stop identifying on racial lines." If they were
Right. There's
truly being
nobody advocating for that, right?
exactly, and white people are the least ethnocentric on earth, like we were just saying. It's we're the only ones who are really like that. So these Marxists, yeah, they may want a world like that, but they're not being intellectually honest. They're basically being cowards and they're just picking on white people. I think at the end of the day, that's what most political positions come down to. It's just, well, I can what am I gonna do in this situation of discomfort where there's things going wrong? Who am I gonna blame? Oh, it's easy to just blame white people. There's no social consequences. We can just kind of shit on these people. We're basically, I would say, we're just being treated as like the nerds of the world, basically. If this was like a school setting, we're being just treated like the nerds of the world who get picked on. I mean, it's a human phenomenon. We know how like bullying and being picked on works. It's like it's that's what's going on. It's like bullies or whatever pick on the people they can get away with picking on.
But that's an interesting phenomenon in and of itself. It's like that idea that, there is that group that you can pick on, and they're like they're a target who you don't think will fight back, or you
Yeah.
know, because I
Well,
feel like in a lot of social like dynamic, there is that going on, either on a subtle level or a more like pronounced level. You always see that, right?
yeah. No, there's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's interesting dynamics going on, and there's clearly some deeper uh way of human instinct, a way of behaving where certain people get treated like shit for certain behavior. People who want to be nice to everyone and like aren't gonna put up a fight tend to I would say tend to get fucked with the most.
I
Um,
actually was watching an Edward Dutton video on autists, and
yeah,
like he was saying that autists are way more likely to actually be attacked or conned, or
yeah,
just have crimes um just sorry
yeah. I've heard that.
like
Was
just be
this?
the victims of crimes. And like it
Yeah,
just made me think that, yeah, a lot of the traits we associate with autism are like positive traits, like just complete honesty, but like in the outside world that you know might not result in the best of circumstances for certain people. Like you're almost like you're so honest that you expect other people to be honest in a way, and
yeah.
not to engage in certain behaviors,
Well,
and
I
you're
I
like
think
almost at a disadvantage because of that.
well I would honestly say that in a weird like the idea that we blame autists for autists being victimized, I would say is part of the same phenomenon we were just talking about. Where it's
About
easy,
blaming.
it's easier to blame them clearly. It's easier to just say there's something wrong with them than to say there's something wrong
Right.
with the person fucking victimizing them. So I would say
Which is almost
even
like it's almost like there's layers to it, right?
exactly, yeah. And even that, yeah, even that interpretation of it, like, oh, autists have this mental problem where they're more likely to be victimized. It's like, why do they have the mental problem? What about the person victimizing them? It's
It's like
clearly,
it's almost like there's more of a consequence for blaming the perpetrator than the victim. So it's like
yeah,
in your mind, it's like you do this weird calculation where you figure, okay, well, this group seems to be more like, it seems to
yeah,
be easier to pick on this group. So
yeah. It's pretty deep in human psychology. I mean, I haven't fully thought it out, but there's something going on there. I'd be down to dissect it further.
I
Maybe we
feel
can
like
make that
that's a genuinely like
important
that's a
topic.
really rich topic that we could get
Yeah,
into.
I'm down to make that the next podcast. I'm down to commit to that.
Sure.
Okay, we can promise that to the fucking viewers if anyone's watching. That the next podcast we will put effort into dissecting that phenomenon because it's clearly going on. There's clearly some bullying
I'd be down
phenomenon.
to fully make notes and try to come up with, yeah, just
Hell
think
yeah,
about it over the next while. And yeah,
for sure. I'm down to make that the next podcast because I've been thinking about that to some extent already. And it's clearly an important thing going on.
actually, to be
Basically,
honest with you, a lot of my thoughts are just just I don't know if it's the same with you, but a lot of the time I'll just be thinking about something and then just yeah, like it'll just lead to a tangential kind of train of thought where I think of like things that relate to that initial thought and like I just sort of store it in my head. But like in terms of actually sitting down and making notes, I don't really do that. I don't know about you. Do you?
Uh, I mean, I vary. I mean, lately I've been I haven't been probably the best mentally, because I feel like, yeah, I don't know, the whole virus situation just gives a little bit of an excuse to kind of not do shit, maybe not be as productive as usual. And I've been drinking a lot. I've been drinking a lot. I'll tell the I'll be honest with the audience. I've been drinking a lot. And yeah, I don't know. Honestly, that's a whole nother topic too. So my thinking, I think, yeah, I haven't been taking too many notes, whereas in the past I have, like when I have a thought, I try to stay on it. But yeah, I think it can be valuable to genuinely, stay on thoughts, like concentrate on a specific subject for a certain amount of time. It's genuinely like beneficial. Like, I don't know, we recognize that with all sorts of things. Like sometimes you have to actually put concentrated effort into things.
Right.
And
Especially like like certain fields
yeah,
like
it's the
law,
same.
let's say you just have to read, what the law actually says and
Yeah,
understand it.
it's the same with, yeah, just thinking in general, I would say. Yeah, it's sometimes it takes actual effort and some people don't put effort in. Yeah, it's something. There's a lot of psychological kind of traits like that that we kind of just assume are natural, like intelligence and um maybe even honesty, like we were saying, and empathy, I would say,
I guess
where
that's a form of willpower, isn't it?
yeah, where people talk about these things like, oh, I'm empathetic, but I would say most people, when they think I'm empathetic, when they think of what someone who's empathetic is, they think it's just like a natural thing, where it's just, oh, this person is just naturally feels empathy automatically in situations, whereas like no one ever thinks about it as if like I should practice empathizing with the other person. Like there's different things, right? It's another thing where it's one word that it's kind of an umbrella term. Like there isn't a separate word for putting effort into being empathetic, or and there and actually having the natural feeling that happens automatically. But a lot of these mental traits, I'd say, like, there's effort that could be put into them to increase them.
But I wonder if there is a difference between people who naturally are inclined to, let's say, be empathetic versus the people who have more of a like a almost rigorous approach towards it, where they consciously try to build up empathy. I wonder if ultimately what we call empathy is different now because of like the different ways.
Empathy is a whole another fucking topic. I'm down to make the next podcast about empathy itself, because
Nice.
that's a whole fucking topic itself. Like we can get really in depth about that. Like you were saying, there's different ways to, like, even you were talking about Ed Dutton and his views on autism. I mean, I heard him mention something like that, where they build up their kind of theory of mind. They kind of have like a logical form of empathy where they kind of build up an understanding of how people think in a different type of way.
We
Yeah.
could even discuss like what it we could I guess we could discuss what it's like to have to endure like a lot of bullshit from society and like just maybe even personal experiences or other things. It's just I don't know. The older I'm getting, the more like I notice that things like the more I see that like things are fundamentally I don't know, like in some ways I feel like they don't change that as much like things aren't as fluid as I thought they were. And like I guess my mind is sort of calcifying more and more. And I think I understand that grumpy old man syndrome where it's just like
Yeah.
like I understand why a lot of people are cranky and upset when they get older because it's like they're just noticing that things are not like the idealism that they grew up with is not translating to the real world and they kind of feel stuck and unsure of what to do. It's just like and they do have like standards that they're trying to reach themselves or through other people and it's just like there's a lot of like there's frustration when that isn't being met. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, like, I mean, it's known in psychology that psychological openness decreases with age. and I've been noticing that also in myself. Like I have less tolerance for a lack of order, like a lack of orderliness in myself, and I guess in others. When you're younger, you're kind of more free to experiment and shit, and kind of you know act in ways that are stupid, kind of like in an experimental way. I feel like that's somewhat normal, but the older you get, the more like I don't know, the more bothered I am by a lack of orderliness. Like, yeah, if I just act like emotional or stupid or something, I'm more disgusted myself than I was when I was younger. And yeah, I could definitely notice myself. Like I'm losing patience for all the fucking um
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's what I'm also referring to. It's like almost lacking patience with people. It's just
yeah,
like you notice the same like behavior and activity. You're just like, how do you not see this? How are you not changing yourself? How are you
yeah.
still doing the same thing? And then when you notice in yourself, it's sometimes worse. And
Oh
you're just
yeah,
like,
no.
oh, the very thing that I'm criticizing, I'm doing myself. And it's just like it's this whole cycle of just sort of like frustration that you didn't experience when you were younger because I guess yeah, your brain changes
Well, also, I mean, when
and
you're
you
younger, I mean,
assume that people are going to change for the better as well. Like you don't have that
yeah,
wisdom to know that a lot of like things are just kind of like out of your hand and things might not necessarily get better, you know, like
yeah, yeah. Things aren't necessarily on an upward trajectory in many ways. That's yeah, that's not how things go. But yeah, like I think I mean, it makes sense to be when you're younger to be more patient because you are learning, like you're learning to some extent, right? You're still figuring things out. But if I don't know, but at some point you should stop being in that experimental phase. So I mean, yeah, as I've gotten older, I've recognized that I've gotten
I
less
think the
patient with that shit.
I think
I
the
think
only
it's
solution
appropriate.
honestly is to just find new people because if you recognize that people are just going to continue to do the same thing and act the same way as like the like ultimately the real solution is that you just have to find new people, right?
I don't know. I don't know because I don't know. I don't know. Depends exactly what you're talking about. We'd have to like get into specifics about the person. But
I'm not even like even referring to a specific person. It's just
yeah,
I think like yeah, just my patience with humans in general. Like I don't know, it's
yeah,
definitely when compared to when I was younger. It's I don't know. It's that's part of the reason probably why I'm less like down to do stuff than I was earlier in life. And
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know how this relates to the election,
Well, it's
but
like society in general. No, no, I like because
yeah,
it's society in general. Like just like we're
I'm
talking
just
about
whining about personal problems. Like,
no, but it's not just personal problems because it's a complete mirror of society where it's like society has been experimenting with this like psychological openness phase where oh we're gonna entertain all these like super out there ideas like transgenderism and we're gonna like think openly about all this stuff and be open minded and then we're at the point I mean it might not be because we're getting older. It might genuinely be because society has been doing this for too long. We're done with the stage. Like just but I mean it might just be a coincidental overlap of our age and what's going on in society. But it seems like it seems like they're it's the same thing going on. Society's been in this open-minded. Let's praise open-mindedness. Let's be open and let's experiment
because it
with
felt like that growing up, didn't it?
it. I mean,
Didn't things
yeah,
feel
that's
experimental, or was it just because we were young?
no, that's how it's been. And then the fucking social justice warriors now are the ones who I would say are still trying to do that. But it's like, listen, we already were open enough about it. We thought about these things, and eventually, I think I mean, it's natural to be open-minded when you're younger, but eventually you get to a place where you realize like there are limits to things. There is a reality, and there's only so open you can be about them. And I think that's where we're getting to in society, and it's appropriate to be losing patience with these people who think we need to keep changing. We need to keep being more open-minded and keep correcting this, like changing this and that. I mean, we are talking about like the a very fundamental change in attitude that is common, like when you go from like liberal to conservative, or whatever, or left to right as you get older. It is a thing that happens. Hopefully, it'll happen on a societal level too. but it is fucking like it's getting unbearable. Like the I don't know, maybe what's going on, maybe part of what's wrong in our society is that young people are just overrepresented, and that's why the psychological openness is overrepresented. All these because it does kind of make sense for young people to be like that, to kind of be have a more leftist mindset. They're trying to figure things out. They're trying to think like, oh, maybe we can improve on this or that.
Yeah, I just remember like high school and just yeah, people just talking about all kinds of stuff, and it really did seem like everyone's ideas were kind of valid in a way. It's like I don't know, let's try that, let's do that. It was just yeah, it's different compared to like now in the workplace, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
But the thing is, no matter how romanticize, like no matter how much you romanticize the past, it's like you still have to contend with what's going on now, though. I don't know.
yeah, but at the same time, it's part of our values, right? If our past was just as shitty as the present, we wouldn't recognize that there's something wrong with the present. So it's yeah. I mean, you don't want to overly romanticize the past, but I mean, sometimes it's better, and you you can use that to fix the present. It's part of how we recognize what's wrong with modern times compared to how they weren't as shitty before.
You were mentioning this, but maybe like I'm not sure, but it might be true. But for a lot of people, like their childhoods were just too good, right? Like things were just too good,
Yeah, I remember I
and
talked about that
and
before.
there's a genuine like trend in culture where people try to revert back to childhood as much as possible. They try to hold on to it, and
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think I was talking that in relation to video games and the whole nostalgia culture. Like,
yeah, and like comic book characters and
yeah,
all that.
yeah, let's keep watching superhero movies. Let's keep playing Pokemon. Let's keep playing video games our whole life. It's like because I mean these things do like they're pretty compelling as a child, right? They're pretty fucking exciting and
Yeah, I
fun
mean
and
nothing was better
stimulating.
than Pokemon.
I know that shit was all fucking very stimulating. And then as we get older, it's like, okay, now you have to work a shitty job all the time. It's like a lot of people don't like get any get anything that matches that level of stimulation, and so they end up in this weird place where they're going back to the what they liked as children, and we're it's bad. It's bad. Like I don't know exactly what is the problem